I'd like to welcome you to this first Lou Douglas lecture of this school year. I'm Linda Tiener, the Executive Director of UFM Community Learning Center, and we are the sponsor of the lecture series. Our lecture series is named for Lou Douglas, who is a distinguished professor of political science at K-State from 1949 to 1977. He did many things during his career, and one of which was be one of the founders of UFM Community Learning Center, and we honor him with this series. Lou was widely known for his power to inspire students, faculty, and just community citizens, and to motivate grassroots organizations and individuals to pursue social justice in politics, economics, foreign policy, and really all areas of life. One housekeeping thing before we get started. At the end of the lecture, there will be a question and answer period. Please, out of respect for everyone here, come to the microphone so everyone can hear what you have to say, and our speaker will then try to answer your question as best she can. If you have to leave before the end of the lecture or at the beginning of the question and answer, please do so quietly so it doesn't disrupt others that are here. I want to thank the College of Education for their partnership in supporting the visit by our speaker tonight. They've done terrific things to help and had seminars and activities going on during the day also to sponsor this lecture series. And now I want to introduce Dr. Linda Thurston. She's the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Studies and Director of the new Faculty Mentoring Program in the College of Education, and she's going to introduce our speaker. Linda.
Thank you, Linda. The other Linda T. And welcome, everybody, and good evening. Lecia Brooks spent part of the day today in the College of Education. We're really lucky. Many of us in the College of Education have been huge fans of the Southern Poverty Law Center for decades. Their work in the education field and the materials that they produce for teachers provide teachers with what they need to make classrooms and schools safe and inclusive for all students. The Southern Poverty Law Center has resources to help teachers with bullying and discipline, LGBT issues, poverty, race, youth incarceration, from an anti-bias, multicultural, and social justice framework. These issues are faced by teachers and schools every day, and they're also the ones that we face as students, professors, parents, and citizens. The Southern Poverty Law Center is dedicated to fighting hate and bigotry and to seeking justice for the most vulnerable members of our society. Using litigation and education and other forms of advocacy, the center works towards the day when the ideals of equal justice and equal opportunity will be a reality. The center also sponsors the Civil Rights Memorial, which honors the memory of individuals who died during the modern American civil rights movement. We're really honored to be able to hear tonight from Lecia Brooks, the Director of Outreach for the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Director of the Center's Civil Rights Memorial Center in Montgomery, Alabama. Prior to joining the Southern Poverty Law Center in 2004, she served as a Director of Special Projects at the National Conference for Community and Justice in Los Angeles. While she was there, she initiated a series of diversion programs for juvenile hate crime offenders, designed and directed residential camp programs for teenage girls to combat the negative effects of sexism, and created human relations training programs for high school students. Ms. Brooks is also the founder and principal consultant for Diversity Matters, an independent consulting firm that develops customized education and cultural workshops for nonprofits, institutions of higher learning, and government entities. She began her career as an elementary school teacher and is a graduate of Loyola Marymount University. During the discussion today in Bluemont Hall, a lot of topics came up, some exciting, some fun, some scary. And during those conversations, Lecia reminded us, come to the talk tonight. That's where the fireworks will be. Welcome.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Linda and Linda. And thank you all for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. It's an honor and it's humbling. I was just looking at the program and looking at all of the distinguished speakers that came before me. Wow. I'm just, a little black girl from Oakland, California, who now happens to work for the Southern Poverty Law Center. And we invited some members here. Are there members from the center here tonight? Thank you all for coming. You all are ones that make it possible for us to produce those fabulous teaching tolerance materials that Linda spoke of. Now, you all look a little bit nervous. You okay? It's going to be okay. Just here to share some truths and talk amongst ourselves about moving toward a more civil discourse. Okay? Through that, we'll uncover some truths, I'm sure, but we're going to come out good on the other side. Okay? As Linda mentioned, I serve as the director of the Civil Rights Memorial Center in Montgomery, Alabama, and I like to always start my talks with reverence to the civil rights martyrs that came before me. This is the Civil Rights Memorial. It was designed by Maya Lin. She's the artist and architect who designed the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. This memorial, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, and it reminds us at the center of our charge. As you can see, the wall has water rolling over it. It's a paraphrase from the book of Amos and a line that Dr. King delivered during the March on Washington. And it says, "Until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream." So that tells me that we have a long way to go. So I want to start there. Until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. In spite of all the tremendous gains that we've made, and people should make gains, and we have a long way to go. The memorial in front of the wall chronicles the major events of the civil rights movement between 1954, the famous Brown v. Board case, the U.S. Supreme Court case that ended desegregation in the schools, ruled desegregated schools as unconstitutional, is said to begin the modern American civil rights movement. So it talks about those kind of things that happened, but it also talks about people that were killed. Over 40 individuals are named on the memorial, people that were killed during the civil rights movement. But it talks about, some real highs in the movement as well, like the March on Washington in August 1963, where Dr. King delivered that speech. And most people, if we had time, and this is why I always go over in time, I like to tell stories about the movement in particular. If you get a moment, I really encourage you to research the March on Washington for Freedom and Jobs. It was not Dr. King's speech to deliver the I Have a Dream speech. It wasn't the platform for that. It was organized by union workers, and they came to tell the government that Dr. King said the people had been given a bad check, and they were there to collect. So when he said, "Until justice rolls down like waters," he said, "No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream." Over 250,000 people converged on the Capitol that day. That was the largest group of people to date that had ever shown up at Washington, D.C. It was a beautiful day. Multiracial, interfaith, it was beautiful. About a month later, in September 1963, a bomb went off at 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, killing 4 girls. So we make some progress, and then certainly, there's some steps back. But as Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, and it bends towards justice. So the sacrifices that were made during the Civil Rights Movement brought us the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And I get the impression as I recount these things to you, you're not really understanding what I'm saying when I tell you that the 1964 Civil Rights Act was everything It ended Jim Crow segregation. It banned discrimination based on race in housing, education, in employment, and in public services, which is huge. We still use that to this very day, and everybody benefited from it, everyone. Again, if we had more time, I'd go into detail about who benefits more, but that's for another lecture. The memorial goes around to 1968 and the assassination of Dr. King, and that kind of bookends the movement. Brown v. Board in 1954, the assassination of Dr. King in 1968, and that's said to be the movement. But Maya Lin believed, and she left this open space called the open timeline, and I want to really direct your attention to that space, because she believes, and we concur, that people fought for social justice prior to 1954 and continue to do so post-68. So it holds that space. Remember, I said it names 40 individuals who were killed on that timeline, and more than 40 people were killed. So it holds a space for them too, as well. But what I want you to contemplate tonight is that it also holds a space for you and me. So you can contemplate, and I can contemplate what will be said about us. What will be said about you in that open space? What would be said about what you've done over your lifetime to forward the cause of social justice? If we were to add your name to the memorial, what could we say? So I'll tell you a little bit about what will be said about the Southern Poverty Law Center as we move into this conversation about a more civil discourse. These are our founders, and I'm not just telling you all this, I tell everybody this. They're white. I like to state the obvious and not so obvious, because a lot of people think that Southern Poverty Law Center must be founded by black people. No. In fact, it was founded by Morris Dees on the left and Joe Levin on the right. Morris Dees was born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama, in the country. Joe was raised in Montgomery as well. Now, these men are of an age that tells you that they were born during the Jim Crow era. And they were white men in Montgomery. And so they were raised to step into and follow through with that tradition of white supremacy. That's who they were raised to be. But they allowed what happened during the civil rights movement change them and change their perspective on life. They saw the sacrifices that were made and came to understand that the Southern tradition of white supremacy was wrong. And they wanted to start the Southern Poverty Law Center as a way to continue the work that had begun around them. Now, I say this, that they allowed themselves to be changed, and this was by simple observation, and this is a really good object lesson. They weren't involved in the movement at all, did not participate in any marches, protests, nothing. And I'd share that with you to tell you that you don't have to participate in any march or protest to be changed, or to dedicate your life to improving the lot of others, or committing yourself to improve the state of social justice. You can recognize what's happening around you and commit to change. So they decided, let's start the Southern Poverty Law Center as a civil rights law firm and move Alabama towards the way of justice. I laugh because, it's still Alabama. So remember I said that they didn't have anything to do with the movement, so they were smart enough to ask somebody who was involved. So do you know this man at the bottom? Julian Bond. Julian Bond was the first president of the Southern Poverty Law Center. They said, Julian, would you help kind of lead us, as to where we should go? Julian was very, very much involved in the movement, intimately involved. He was a co-founder of SNCC, and he was the youngest legislator voted into youngest person voted into the Georgia legislature. He was the youngest person that ever had his name entered into nomination. The Vice President of the United States is a wonderful, wonderful man that passed away a little over a year ago. But they went to Julian and asked him, and he was happy to help out. Some of the early cases that the center took on were suing the state of Alabama, because Alabama, and we continue in that fine tradition today, just because a court rules that something is illegal or unconstitutional doesn't mean that Alabama's just going to simply roll on it. We just don't do that. We just don't. So what had to happen in this instance, remember the Civil Rights Act banned discrimination based on race in employment. In the late 70s through the 80s, Alabama State Trooper Force was all white, and they refused to integrate the State Trooper Force. So the Southern Poverty Law Center sued them. That was one of Morris and Joe's first cases. They had to take that case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, 15 years before Alabama agreed to integrate the State Trooper Force. And now the State Trooper Force is one of the most integrated forces in the country. And it didn't have to take that long. So we sued local municipalities over integrating pools, swimming pools, those kinds of things that typically happened in places after the civil rights movement. But then Morris always kind of was paying attention to what was going on in the larger society, read about these new American citizens, people who had come to become American citizens, Vietnamese fishermen who had come to call Galveston home, refugees really who settled in Galveston, decided that they were shrimpers in Vietnam and wanted to do the same kind of work in Galveston. Well, there was a Klan group there who were also fishermen and resented that quite a bit, and took to going out on their boats in their Klan regalia and intimidating these fishermen. Morris heard about it and decided to go out there and represent, went to go talk to the fishermen and convince them to allow him to represent them, and sued the Klan and won. So that was really our first case against a Klan group or any hate or extremist groups, and that was filed in 1981. But we really came to the attention of the nation, really, I think, when we represented, or after we represented this woman. Her name is Beulah Mae Donald. Her son, Michael Donald, lived in Mobile, Alabama, and two guys who belonged to a group called the United Klans of America abducted their son. He wasn't an activist. He was a college student. He was on his way home from work, working a night shift, and these two guys pulled up to him and asked for directions, and then abducted him and took him into their car, then took him to a remote location, beat him up, cut his throat, then brought him back to the neighborhood and lynched him from a tree. And they did all this because another black person who lived in Mobile was found not guilty in the murder of a white police officer. So the Klan leader wanted to send a message to black folks that if they were going to serve on juries, that they were going to find black people guilty in the murder of white people. So they selected Michael Donald. Now, the United Klans of America was a notorious group. They're the group that set the bomb at 16th Street Baptist Church, killing those 4 girls. They're also the group that beat up peaceful protesters, freedom riders, when their buses stopped in Anniston and in Montgomery, Alabama. They also killed a white woman named Viola Liuzzo, who helped with the Selma and Montgomery March. They had done lots of really bad things. But to think in 1981 they were still killing people was just too much. So Morris said, we've got to sue them. We've got to do something about this Klan group. So he sued them in civil court. The 2 guys who committed the murder were eventually found guilty in the murder, but the Klan leader was going to get off because he didn't commit the murder. So Morris kind of came up with this then new legal strategy that would hold the Klan leader responsible for the actions of its members, kind of based on organized crime law, and found a way to sue him and got a $7 million judgment against the Klan leader, which had the effect of bankrupting the Klan organization and putting him out of business. Mrs. Donald didn't get $7 million. The Southern Poverty Law Center didn't get $7 million. The Southern Poverty Law Center is a nonprofit. We don't charge our clients to represent them, nor do we share in any of the award money. But she was so pleased that that Klan group was bankrupt. She got their property, and they were essentially closed down. So we thought that that was a pretty good little strategy, and went about looking for other hate and extremist groups to take down. Well, this man, his name is Tom Metzger, and he was a leader of white Aryan resistance in California. And he had sent some of his guys to Portland, Oregon to recruit new members. They came across this man, Mr. Sarah, who was an Ethiopian student. He was a graduate student at the University of Portland. and he was there, fully documented, studying. And they saw him, and they killed him. So we were able to sue Mr. Metzger and put White Aryan Resistance out of business. And I mention Portland in particular because people are under the mistaken impression that hate and extremist groups are confined to the Deep South, which is not at all true, as this case will attest to as well. This was in 1991, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I had occasion to go to Coeur d'Alene. Beautiful. There's a lot of white people there. And that fact makes it real possible and real easy for white supremacists to just hang out. Nobody notices anything. Although, why they didn't notice this, they had this huge compound with buildings that looked just like this with Nazi symbols and swastikas all over it and stuff. They had a lot of property. They used to train new members. They bring them up there for training. They had a school. They had a so-called church. They had all this stuff going on. One day, though, our client, black woman, and her son were driving by the compound, and their car backfired. And they had, at this compound, they had these security sentries. They were kind of, they were posted. And legend has it, they had been drinking. So when they heard the car backfire, they thought it was gunshots, and they said, "The Jews are coming." And so they got in their car and went after, who they thought were Jews. And they saw there were black people, and they're like, fine, Jews, black people. They kept after them, ran them off the road, beat them, would have killed them had not a neighbor come out with his own shotgun and threatened to kill them. Still, they had abducted our clients, and so we were able to sue them. And our client, in this case, got this property, and that's the picture that you see now. She had all the buildings razed, turned it into a park, and gave the property to the city. And the city was thrilled to get rid of them. And back to the South, in 1996, in Charleston, South Carolina, we were able to bring the largest settlement or the largest judgment in a case against a hate and extremist group, and this was the Christian Knights of the Ku Klux Klan who torched a 100-year-old black church in Charleston. You may recall just a couple years ago, it was last year, can't remember, that was starting up again, this torching of African-American churches. Now, our most recent case was in 2007, or filed in 2007 against a group called the Imperial Clans of America, and they were headquartered in Kentucky. And the guy in the middle, his name is Ron Edwards, and he had about a dozen small Klan cells all across the Southeast. But this group in Kentucky, they were also recruiting new members. You'll recognize the theme. And he had sent some guys out to the county fair. And our client in this case, 16-year-old boy, Jordan Groover, who happens to be multiracial, was tagged by these Klansmen as an illegal, and they beat him within an inch of his life. 16 years old, little guy, and these guys were huge, just like these guys. Beat him with their steel-toed boots, and they didn't kill him, but he suffered a lot of physical and mental harm. We sued him and got a $2.5 million judgment against Ron Edwards, which had the effect of closing down 10 of his 12 groups. He's in prison on another matter. As I like to joke, he decided to break bad and went into the meth business and now is in jail on meth charges. Same thing happens when you lose your Klan group. And so those are the major cases that we have brought against these hate and extremist groups. And people are generally pleased. Like, yeah, those are bad people. Klansmen, bad. Aryan Nation, bad. And that brand of racism, really bad. And good riddance. Glad we got rid of them. That's not me. That's not us. That's them, right? And a lot of people are under the mistaken impression that the Klan is gone. This particular image was taken this year in rural Georgia. And you see they dressed up their costumes even more. They're like colored. Look, it's got a purple one. I'm so sorry. And these grown people put on these outfits and come out and, had their little rally in rural Georgia so that people could be reminded that they were still there. And I don't know if you heard recently that there's been a spat of flyers being distributed all across the country. Have you heard about it? They're still recruiting. Klan numbers have gone down tremendously. The number of groups have gone down, and the number of members that belong to the groups have gone down. So they're just on this real recruitment thing. But because of all that's going on right now, which we'll get to a little bit later, they've feel emboldened to just pass out flyers under the hope in the hopes that you want to receive it. They're passing out flyers and recruitment flyers in Pennsylvania, Washington State, North Carolina, California, Michigan, New York, Delaware, Massachusetts, Florida, Connecticut, and Wyoming. Thousands and thousands of hate-filled notes are also being sent over fax machines and printers. Last year, recruitment flyers went out to a number of colleges. I don't know if K-State was hit in that, but lots of colleges kind of just received these hateful faxes across their machines. Somebody had kind of hacked into their systems. Now they're not only they are recruiting new members, but I want to tell you what it says on some of those flyers. They say the ideal members have a European white racial consciousness. They have an interest in promoting and advancing European white races, and preferably agnostic. The last one is a switch, because they were a Christian group. That's why they burn crosses, because they count themselves as the true Christian. So what we noticed, because we track and monitor this kind of thing at the Southern Poverty Law Center, this is a new emphasis on European white, not just enough to be white anymore. It really is that intentional tie to Europe, and then the moving away from people who are identified as Christian. So hold that. Just put a what do they call that? A nail or something in this. A pen. Thank you. Put a pin in this. Then they got your neighbors, right? And what I'm talking about now is that okay, remember I said that people kind of easily recognize and vilify and separate themselves from, Klan groups and Aryan Nation and hate groups and all that, or those kinds of hate groups. But these are hate groups too. The Southern Poverty Law Center has long recognized Westboro Baptist Church as a hate group. In fact, they were supposed to come out and protest tonight. They heard about tonight's affair, and so I don't know. They're out. They're still there. Some of you could be here. I don't know. You may not have a sign. But what bothers me most about this particular group, and they've come to Montgomery and protest too. Look at this kid. Why are you going to make a kid hold a sign like this? This, to me, is child abuse. Why can't we do something about that? And as we think about them and the hate that they put out there, because some people say, well, the Klan is one thing, but this is a religious organization. Surely that's different. Surely they're not a hate group, right? Well, as I was planning for our talk and I wanted to offer some real-life examples of uncivil discourse or things that are not helpful, I pulled some quotes. I'm going to need your help, Miss, right there. Could you go up to this mic and read it? Thank you. I had it printed, and then I must have left it at the hotel. Okay, read it, please.
The one on the screen?
Loudly.
Okay. It's not about that person. It's about the whole societal phenomenon. Westboro spokesman Steve Drain of Topeka, Kansas, said Thursday night in a telephone interview, "It's never been okay to be gay, and it's never going to be okay to be gay, no matter how much the spirit of the times calls for the popularity of that sin." On why they are picketing outside the funeral of 2 of the victims of the massacre in Orlando.
Thank you. Wait right there. Wait right there. What is your name?
Kayla Savage.
Kayla?
Mm-hmm.
Kayla, give Kayla a hand because she's got to do more. We have to encourage her to stay. Thank you, Kayla. Do you know what this Orlando thing that he's referring to?
Yes.
What happened in Orlando?
There was a gay nightclub that was shot up.
How many people were killed?
That I don't want to tell because I'm not sure exactly the number, but a lot.
49 people.
49.
A lot of people, right? Okay, thank you. Are you okay?
Yeah.
You'll get better.
Okay.
So just sit right there. Thank you. So the Westboro Baptist Church has just had a bug up their butt forever about gay people. They really have. Now, most people associate with them with picketing the funerals of service members who have been killed. But I'm old enough to remember when they were picketing the funerals of people who died from HIV/AIDS. That's how they started, right? And that was what they were all about, and that's what they're still about today. If you look at their signage, it always relates to it. They're picketing service members, but saying they were killed because the United States is too soft on gays or too tolerant of gays. And I don't know if you've noticed a pattern, but typically people who have all this energy about gay people, usually something comes out about them later. The father has passed away, which you probably know about, but the daughter has really taken up the charge, and they still are engaged in this hateful rhetoric. They were a small group and real good example of, doesn't matter the size of the group, this is a small, primarily family-led operation that creates so much hate and so much hurt in this country. And so when we think about hate and intolerance and incivility, let's also think about them. Now there's this other group, and I'm not, this is, I promise you, the last Christian group that I'm on. They call themselves Christians. This is Dove Ministries in Florida. You ever heard of Pastor Terry Jones? Terry Jones was the one that called for the burning of the Quran. A supposed Christian leader himself calling for the burning of another religious group's holy book. We could just stop there. But no, he gets T-shirts for all his small congregation and has everyone wear this T-shirt, Islam is of the devil. And this is another small group that's got tremendous attention. When they had when he had the idea to burn the Quran, this news went all across the globe. So, again, the hateful rhetoric of a few can go a really long way. What does he say, Kayla? Or what did he say?
Islam has one goal, that is world domination. Dove Ministries, Pastor Terry Jones.
Say it again, honey.
Islam has one goal, that is world domination.
That's what he said. And when you put things like that out into the world, then it's real easy for people to say, yeah, give me a T-shirt. Something's wrong with them. So Dove Ministries was on the hate list. Well, Terry Jones is now selling French fries at some, seriously he is. It's some French fry joint somewhere. Now, some people, not everyone is happy about the fact that, wow, you guys identify black groups on the hate group? Well, some people first don't know it and think that we're racist against white people because we have a hate list. But it's an equal opportunity hate list. And though the vast majority, overwhelming majority, I'd say 95% of the groups on it are white supremacists in some kind of way or anti-Semitic, there are a number of groups that we identify as hate groups that are also black extremist groups. The first one would be, or the first example would be the New Black Panther Party. Now, I was born and raised in Oakland, California, and I grew up at a time when the Black Panther Party, it's formative. They have nothing to do with the Black Panther Party. And if you think you know anything about the Black Panther Party, if I could just put in a plug, watch the PBS special. That was excellent. These people just took the name, and that is all. They're a hateful group of people. They're primarily known for going to intimidate white voters at the polls. You may have seen them. Also on the list, people also get upset, Minister Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam. Now, if you ever heard Farrakhan speak more than 10 words, you would not be surprised that he's on the hate group list. He's very anti-white, he's anti-Semitic, and he's anti-gay. And he seems to be fine with that position, although people from the Nation of Islam did come to the Southern Poverty Law Center and asked us to take them off the list. We said, well, change your rhetoric, and we will, but they did not. Kayla? What did Minister Farrakhan say recently?
So if the federal government will not intercede in our affairs, then we must rise up and kill those who kill us. Stalk them and kill them and let them feel the pain of death that we are feeling.
That alone seems to quote. Thank you, honey. We're done. Thank you so much. I may call on you again, though. You were so good. Thanks, Kayla. You okay? Breathe. Okay. So, I don't know if when we think about hate groups or when we think about people and groups that we would assign a hate group label, if we think about the rhetoric that is heard, that people say, and if we would deem that hate language. Well, at the center, we create this hate map every year. We wipe the map clean, and every year we identify all of the active hate groups in the United States. This is the map for 2015. We're always looking a year back. As you can see, it has different icons for different groups. Some are Klan, some are neo-Nazi, some are the black separatists. But just take in kind of the United States and see where you might move. I don't know. People are never surprised that there's a high concentration in the Southeast, but look at the Northeast. There's always been a high concentration of hate and extremist groups in the Northeast, but people don't seem to recognize that. I don't know. We've been collecting this information on hate groups since the year 2000. And so the numbers for 2015, 892 active hate groups, represent a 48% increase. 48% increase since the year 2000. And you see that in 2000 it kind of kept going up, and then it went down a little bit over the last couple years. And that's primarily because, one, when we thought we were getting someplace in terms of passing comprehensive immigration reform, that took the wind out of the sails of those hate groups that were interested in, that were xenophobic. And then with marriage equality and the advancement of LGBT rights, that kind of took it out of them too. So they went down. And then after Obama won the second term, there was nothing to be done until the next election cycle. So when we think about hate groups, again, I just want to remind you, most people think of this: 1967 Klan. That's it. Well, that group that I showed you earlier that was out during the day in their purple and red, well, they hung out all night and continued those rituals of years gone by and did a cross burning. So I wanted to just quickly, and you can access this information on our website, but just quickly kind of go over with you the makeup of the hate groups that currently exist. 190 Klan groups, 94 neo-Nazi groups, 95 racist skinhead, 19 Christian identity, they're not Christian, 35 neo-Confederate, 180 black separatists, which is a huge jump, and 184 general hate. And under general hate, there would be anti-LGBT, anti-immigrant, those kinds of groups. So that's kind of pretty much the state of hate groups in 2015. We expect this to increase again in 2016, or for 2016, based on what's happened this year, or what's been happening and the trends that we're seeing this year. Now, let's go. People ask, why? Well, it's 2016. Somebody said that awful lie about being post-racial. So why we have an increase in hate groups? The number one reason why we have an increase in the number of active hate groups is the shifting demographics that are taking place in the United States. So that's the big change piece. It's a big change for us now, but it's not a new change. That's what this country does. We go through these shifts and changes in demographics. We have oftentimes fueled by immigration. But then we also have economic downturn. So it's although people still perceive we're in an economic downturn, but those are the kind of real indicators of the increase in anxiety. Demographic shifts, perception of economic insecurity. Okay, so let's look at the demographic shifts for a minute. In 1970, the United States looked like this: 66%, or 83% white, 17% people of color. And I like to say that people like that kind of diversity. And it just happens to be white people of color, but if another group was dominant, they would like it too, because it's a clear majority. But then you have a little bit of restaurants or or culture, or isn't that interesting? That's what people are most comfortable with when they're coming from a dominant culture frame. Now, and not even now, but 2010, and it's changed a little bit already. 66% white, 34% people of color. That's a huge, huge, huge shift. And though I come from California, and some other places on the coast have already gone through those shifts, and we went through this madness in California too, although people think, oh, California, diversity, everybody's happy. No, we had Prop 209, we had Prop 187, we had the same kind of hateful things that are happening across the country now. But what's happening, what's new is that these demographic shifts are converging on the Midwest and the Northeast, in the Southeast, in ways that they hadn't before, in the Midwest and the Southeast. So Kansas, I understand that you have a few cities that are already majority people of color. And it's going to continue, right? They're at what demographers call this tipping point in the shift. And though demographers have been talking about this shift for a long time and predicting it for some time, now it's in the mainstream and people are paying attention. Oh my God, white people are going to be in the minority? Is that right? They started saying that. It was in 2050. White people no longer be in the majority, and I think white people kind of heard it, and then they were like, 2040. What? What's going on? And this is how you hear it. And I'm not joking. This is how you hear it. Like, what is happening? And my whole world is shifting. There's like sand under my feet. What has happened? What do you mean white people are no longer going to be? You just can't even wrap your head around it. So that's what's happening. What I'd like to point out, if we can get through this little crisis situation, is that we'll be the country that we always purported to want to be, where there's no clear majority. If we get to 2050, 2060, there'll be no racial majority. Then after that, there will be again. But we'll have a little bit of time. It's very Star Trek-esque, where we seriously. I mean, we have a decision to make. We can go this way, we can go that way, and we can establish kind of how it is to live in a true pluralistic society where equity reigns. So we can practice that now. I don't know where this random quote. Oh. This random quote. I'll read it. That's okay, Kayla. I had this quote because I didn't have a hate group to show you that represented immigration or xenophobia or anti-immigrant, but you all know who Representative Stephen King is, don't you? Is he from here? Oh. He says, for everyone who's a valedictorian, there's another 100 out there that weigh 130 pounds, and they've got calves the size of cantaloupes because they're hauling 75 pounds of marijuana across the desert. He continued, those people would be legalized with the same act. And this is when he was speaking out against the DREAM Act. Okay, maybe there's some nice Latinos, nice Mexicans, but I'm telling you, they're all druggies, and they're all bringing across drugs. So when we heard from Mr. Trump, when he came down the escalator and said, Mexicans are rapists and they're sending all the killers and all, he wasn't the first one to say this. He just made it possible for it to be said more frequently and more loudly in the mainstream. But I'm jumping ahead. I wanted to talk about some things that have happened recently that qualify as domestic terrorism, because one of the things that we do in this country is really kind of focus on foreign terrorism, when the threat, prior to the Orlando killing, there were more individuals that were killed by domestic terrorists than foreign jihadist terrorists, truly. There have been all of these little acts where, maybe it doesn't rise to 49 people, but people have been killed. You may recall the massacre at the Sikh temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. Remember when this guy, Michael Wade Page, went into a Sikh temple and just mowed down these people. You know why? And the Sikhs are caught up in the crossfire of this anti-Islam, anti-Muslim, Islamophobic sentiment. They're not Muslims, but are perceived to be. Sikhs and Hindus have suffered tremendously in terms of being targeted for hate crimes as a result of our anti-Muslim sentiment. Then there's these people who are committed anti-Semites their entire life. This guy went into the Jewish Community Center in, that was here. And killed 3 people who weren't Jewish. I mean, it's a shame that anybody was killed, but he wanted to go out in a bang of glory, this old man who's been an anti-Semite since his whole life, and wants to go out with some bang of glory in the eyes of these other white supremacist haters and make a name for himself. That's why he did it. That's exactly why he did it. Yeah. And then, of course, you're familiar with this kid, Dylan Roof, who went into Charleston in June 2015 and killed 9 African Americans at church. So the threat is very real, and the violence is very real, too. You probably don't hear about kind of this random violence that happens as a result of hate group activity. This happened in California, I think it was in April, in Anaheim. And if you know Los Angeles, or if you've ever been to Disneyland, Disneyland's in Anaheim. It's supposed to be the happiest place on earth. And these Klan members went down there to have a rally and got into fights with people. People didn't like it. A few months later, where was that? Let me see. Yeah, that was April in Anaheim. And then in June, a few months later, skinheads are joining forces with alt-right members to host a rally in Sacramento, and people get beat up there as well. California. And all of this is happening against a backdrop. Again, I have to return to this notion of Islamophobia because I don't think you're really understanding. A report came out of the New York Times on September 11th that said that that Islamophobia is higher today than it was post 9/11. There's been a tremendous increase in the number of hate crimes targeting Muslims. And then just, I think, unfair expectations for their behavior as well. Then we see attacks on, not just people that are perceived to be terrorists, but you're Muslim? Something must be, like you said, they're out for world domination. I know you didn't say it, but. So, let's talk about Donald J. Trump. But let me preface that by saying we're a 501c3, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and we don't endorse or support or electioneer or encourage you to vote for one candidate or the other. But because of the work that we do in the realm of hate and extremism, it allows us to talk about this particular candidate. We issued a report out of Teaching Tolerance a few months ago called The Trump Effect. And what motivated that was that we had seen news reports that on school campuses there were in athletic encounters, teams were telling each other, build a wall, build a wall. And we saw this and we wondered if it was happening across a lot of schools. So we surveyed 5,000 teachers, and the results that came back were fascinating, disturbing, and depressing, and said, yes, this is in fact happening everywhere. All of the rhetoric that we hear in the public square around this campaign, all the rhetoric that came from the time Mr. Trump came down that escalator and demonized Mexicans as rapists and drug dealers, onto the ban of Muslims from this country, onto vilifying every group of people, is being reflected in the classroom. So children are hearing all of this and repeating that amongst themselves. As I talked to the teachers earlier today, we were talking about how schools had made pretty great strides in terms of reducing bullying and harassment in the schools, and this whole thing has taken us way back. And teachers don't know what to do about it. So that's why we produced this report and wanted to offer teachers some support around trying to unpack all this noise that is coming out of the political cycle. Now, heat, noise, and hate in a political cycle is not new, but what is new with this particular cycle is that the things that Trump has said, the dehumanizing things that he has said about people have made it possible for other people to say that in the mainstream. Whereas before Mr. Trump would vilify an entire group of people, say Mexicans. If somebody said that, like when Stephen King said that, what I read about Mexicans and their legs like cantaloupes or whatever he said, he was summarily slammed across the country by the news media. And this would happen every time somebody would say something like that. But now, it's totally fine. It's being honest. People just saying what they feel. And that's where we've lost our way in terms of a civil discourse. Now, some people say, "Oh, you mean civil discourse? You mean political correctness?" No, I don't. I mean civility. And civility used to mean, it still means this, that people speak to one another in the public square in ways that advance the good of the society, right? You weigh out what you want to say against the good of the society. Now it's completely self-determined. It's what I want to say. I can say what I want to say. That's what I believe. That's what I think. You won't make me politically correct. When research shows that the hot rhetoric the hot and dehumanizing rhetoric that comes from Mr. Trump has brought out the white supremacists. And this is not hyperbole. This is true. People like David Duke, who was a former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, who unsuccessfully launched a bid for the presidency himself, is now running again for Senate. And he said, voting against Donald Trump at this point is really treason to your heritage. Another white supremacist said, Trump may be the last hope for a president who would be good for white people. Or, Trump thinks like me. Do you think it's a coincidence that everybody like me loves Trump and supports him? It's been reported repeatedly, and I don't care how many times he says it's not true or he didn't do it. He tweets and retweets white supremacist memes and comments all the time. He has the support, the open support of the alt-right. You may have heard this new expression, the alt-right. The alt-right is just a new name for white nationalists, white supremacists. It's just white supremacy in the digital age. It's just people who we're the alternative right. And they are, in fact, white nationalists. If you go to any of their sites, you'll find this to be true. We've done the research, and I'm really not exaggerating. I'm trying to be as clear as I possibly can with you because this is serious. What we find is happening in the schools, or what's happening kind of in society that's having an impact on the schools, it's going to be with us for a long time to come. Because what's happening in the schools is that teachers are too afraid to say anything because they don't want to contradict what the kids might be hearing from their parents. They don't want to get into a debate with the student. One teacher said in the survey, she said, well, what if the student tells me, or the student did try to tell me, well, Mr. Trump is going to be the next president, and he said this. Why are you contradicting him? So we have to be very careful about what we allow to go forth in the public. I'll read these, Kayla. Thank you for volunteering. These are a couple of things that Mr. Trump said. If Obama, through his weakness, lets them come in, I'm sending them out if I win. This was on the Syrian refugees. This was just last year in November. Remember the whole Syrian crisis, refugee crisis that maybe we had something to do with, and now we don't want to take any responsibility for and expect the rest of the world to hold all the refugees, and we don't want any because we can't trust them. And so this is what he says about them. America is going to hell because the NFL defended openly gay player Michael Sam. This is what this is what Trump said. It sounds very much like the Westboro Baptist Church. And this, I think, is just most revealing. This wasn't during the election cycle. Black guys counting my money, I hate it. The only kind of people I want counting my money are short guys that wear yarmulkes every day. And this is not the only anti-Semitic thing he says. He's an anti-Semite. And people need to recognize that, right? He'll say that, you just need to recognize and call out the hate and extremism when you hear it, and don't let it go past. Don't let it be okay. That's the only way that we're going to move towards a more civil discourse, is to take back the discourse, make it not okay for these things to be said, and applaud it. It's not okay. If we have issues with one another, if we have questions of one another, if we have fear or distrust of one another, then we have to talk about it. We can't just say these hateful things, because the thing is that it's a straight line to that increase in hate crimes against those people, those very people that you're talking about. Remember when George W. Bush, after 9/11, said Islam is of peace and the terrorists do not represent Islam? Hate crimes went down against Muslims. Now they go up. It's just a fact. We are responsible. Hate crimes against LGBT people go up when there's an increase in anti-gay rhetoric. When anti-gay rhetoric is allowed to go forth, there's an increase in hate crimes against that targeted group. This guy, oh wow. I'm sorry I missed the other. She was supposed to tell me at 10 minutes, and now the sign says 0. I didn't see it. I didn't even see it. I'm sorry. It's 0. Okay. This is Matthew Heimbach, new face of white nationalists. He was at Townsend, and he's the guy who tried to start all those white student unions. Do you remember hearing about it? That's him. And he's a white nationalist. He says he's a white nationalist. He just wants, white people to live by themselves, and or us to live, people of color to live someplace else. And he is the head of that traditional workers' party that they were offering to serve as security for Donald Trump and at the RNC, and they didn't turn him down. They're open supporters. You may have heard that the Southern Poverty Law Center named White Lives Matter as a hate group. You may not have heard why. Because some people conflate White Lives Matter with Black Lives Matter. They're completely different, right? White Lives Matter was created, founded in response to Black Lives Matter in direct opposition. This is what their founder said. We're dedicated to the promotion of the white race and talking about and taking positive action as a united voice against issues facing our race. Do not allow our lands to turn into Haiti. It's time to shut down the savage beasts, or it's time to shut the savage beasts down. Shut down Black Lives Matters. That's their platform. And so there was very easy call for us to name them a hate group. And we don't typically name hate groups in mid-cycle, but they kind of warranted it. So then it follows, and people have been calling on us for over a year. Name Black Lives Matter a hate group. They're a hate group. Over a year, people have been at our door about this. Fact of the matter is that they're not a hate group. If you go to their website and you look at what their founders say, they are not a hate group. They were not created in opposition to anything. They were created as a way to validate and lift up and encourage black people in the face of police violence. And in particular, the phrase itself started after George Zimmerman was acquitted in the murder of Trayvon Martin. It didn't pick up as a movement or become a movement or a group until after the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson. And then it began to pick up steam, and it's a non-hierarchical organization, and people can, start chapters all over, but there's a very definite, it's a non-violent movement. Yes, some people who have participated or gone to Black Lives Matters protests have said some ugly things and have engaged in violence. So did people during the civil rights movement. Not everyone who went on every march with Dr. King was committed to nonviolence. Some people threw rocks there too. The fact of the matter is that Dr. King's movement is always credited with being nonviolent, regardless of what the people did. But I would remind you that people involved in the civil rights movement, including Dr. King, were called communists and infiltrators too. So this often happens. And then lastly, I would remind us that the Black Lives Matter movement is really a multiracial movement. It's really a movement of young people, again, much like the movement that happened during 1960 and 1961 in the civil rights movement, when black and white college students band together for the freedom rides, when black and white college students converged on Mississippi for Freedom Summer, or when they worked together during the lunch counter sit-ins. These are multiracial young people movements. And I, for one, am very encouraged. Like you see more Black Lives Matter protests and actions in Wisconsin or Minnesota than you do in a lot of places that have a majority black population. And another thing that it's brought out, I think it really has allowed a place for white people to really be allies and be real players in stopping systemic oppression as it continues. So you know what happened in Charlotte. You know what happened in Tulsa. So this whole thing about police violence and the killing of black people continues. And then people forget that. People say, well, it's Black Lives Matters against Blue Lives Matters. I don't have the statistic in front of me, but I know my father was a cop, and most black people I know have somebody in their family who was a police officer. So it's not Black Lives Matters against Blue Lives. It's Black Lives Matters against police violence. And so this picture was taken in Charlotte. You may have heard this congressional representative, what he said after, I think, the second night of protest in Charlotte, that black people were protesting because they're jealous of black people hate white people, and were jealous because white people are successful and black people are not, and that's why they were protesting in Charlotte. This is a congressional representative, people. Now, if we can't hold them to higher standards, I don't know what. I don't know why everybody in his district wasn't at his door or wrote a letter to him. These are the opportunities for us to interrupt and shift the conversation. There's another opportunity here with Pence. You may have heard what he said. Come on, could you guys just stop talking about institutional racism, please, and bias? Could you stop? This reminds me of Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail. You probably don't know anything about that. Dr. King wrote the letter from Birmingham jail to white clergy who implored upon him to stop protesting. So the same thing happened. Like, come on, Dr. King. It's 1963. This has been going on for some time now. Do we have to have another protest? Things are going to change. Things are looking better. Stop with the protest, essentially. And he wrote them that beautiful letter to Birmingham jail. Like, how can you ask me to stop? How can you? And so I would ask the same question of him. So I'm done. This is my last quote that I'm leaving with you, and it comes from Dr. King. All I'm saying is simply this, that all life is interrelated, that somehow we're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Taken from a letter from Birmingham jail. And it's just so true. You may not see it. You may not feel it. This may be kind of totally new to you. You may have kind of dipped in and out of what's going on in our country right now. But it's affecting you too. So I am asking you to get on board and shift this country. Oh my God. I was about to say something slogan-esque. I'm so sorry. I had to stop myself. We have to shift the dialogue. If we want to return to a civil discourse, then we are the ones that have to make it happen. We were talking at dinner with James about how it's easy for us, and we're all too eager to blame government for what's going wrong. It's just awful. Government's to blame. We are to blame, right? It's a representative government. If we elect the representatives, then we have to deal with the representatives. If we don't like it, then it's incumbent upon us to change it. Today is also National Voter Registration Day, so make sure you register to vote. That really is all I have, and I hope I didn't take all your time for questions. Thank you. Sorry, Linda. Linda T. Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. Sorry you have to leave. Thank you. Ooh. Thanks, students. Sorry, it's my fault, but thank you. Thanks for coming. I don't take any offense to it at all. Thanks, Frat. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I'm the secretary of Manhattan High School's Black Student Union, and we've been really looking to make the club more involved in the community again, and more of a positive change in the Manhattan community. Do you have any suggestions of what we could do to create that positive change and open civil discourse?
I read your, well, I don't know if you wrote it. I read the Cats for Consciousness, or...
No, this is the high school. So.
Oh, you're at a high school.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So what is it that you want to do? What do you think you want to do? What do you want to get the students to do?
I think a lot of us want to create more of an awareness and openness around these like hard to talk about subjects, because so many people just get really defensive about them and don't want to discuss them. And I think we really want to create that openness and
Do you ever
ability
have
to talk about it.
any kind of dialogue sessions or kind of like volunteer sessions where people can talk about how they're feeling about these issues?
We do within the club, but we'd like to be able to affect more positive change on a larger scale, like throughout the school.
Across the school. Well, I would encourage you to get your club members ready, like practice with them some workshops or some discussions that you want to have in the larger community. Practice with the club, and then reach out. Seth has some connections to a leadership group, don't you? Yeah. And then maybe there's some people at the university too that can help you design and facilitate an all-day session where students from all over campus can come and participate. How's your administrators are supportive? You've talked to them?
Yeah, mostly.
Okay. Keep them involved every step of the way, right? Because you don't want to just surprise them with it. Invite them to the meetings. Have them sit in, as you guys are planning out this stuff. Get some parents to support you, because it's really then hard for administrators to say no to parents. It's easier for them to say no to you, and get some community support. Maybe there's I don't know what other groups are in this area, what advocacy groups are in the area. I would get allied organizations to help, not just black organizations, but queer organizations, immigrant rights groups, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. Hey.
Hi. Oh God, that's way too loud. You're probably familiar with this, but in 2006, the FBI released a report detailing how the Ku Klux Klan, as well as many other white supremacist groups, had spent decades attempting to, and oftentimes successfully, infiltrating local police forces across the entire country. And in the wake of various text messages, social media posts by obviously racist police officers, as well as the multiple New Orleans, Minneapolis, Philander Castile, Alton Sterling, various different killings of black people. What does the Southern Poverty Law Center, in addition to other organizations, what can we do about creating that discourse about critiquing hate groups that already exist in part in police forces?
that's an excellent question, and you're absolutely right. What you have to do is remind folks, and this would be the police agency as well, that you're a community, and so you're invested in whatever goes on in the community. Going back to what I said about kind of creating that space for a civil discourse requires that. So we're responsible for and to one another. So you go there and you show up when you're needed, not just in response to something. You're not just being reactive, but you're being a part of that community. And so you're noticing and paying attention when something good, and you're calling out when something good happens, and you're calling out when something not so good happens, right? And it's better received then. What we do at the center, because we can't develop relationships in that way, when we see something, we just call them out, right? What we do in terms of investigative reporting, we've gotten a lot of folks fired from their jobs because this just can't be. But it would be so much better if the community called out their own people. We had a case recently in Anniston where there were 2 police officers that were members of the League of the South, I think it was, and posting back and forth, and we did not have the support of the community. Oftentimes we don't have the support of the community in Alabama, but if you make yourself a part of it, then you have every right to call them out when they're wrong. But remember to comment when they're doing the right thing as well.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Hi. Oh, hi.
Hi. I just wanted to comment to the issue of starting dialogue.
Yes, ma'am.
A site that I think merits mentioning is conversationcafes.org.
Oh.
And they have some really good facilitation tools. And I think, especially at the high school, they've got guidance on how to form your questions to have dialogue. Works well with to start small with less controversial.
Say what it is
topics.
again.
Conversationcafe.org.
Okay. Conversationcafe.org. You can also go to tolerance.org, and we have a lot of free materials as well.
Hi.
Hi.
Just a little background. I'm currently a nonprofit leadership studies minor through the Staley School of Leadership Studies at Kansas State University right now. Mm-hmm. And so just asking as a student, what advice can you give to myself and some of my other classmates that are present here today in order to kind of jumpstart our careers, hopefully into those similar 501c3 organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Well, you should take advantage of internships. They're not paid typically. But you do get that experience, mm-hmm. and you should, hound them for volunteer opportunities. Kind of decide what kind of field that you want to go into, and find an agency that you like in your community, 1 or 2 agencies, and just hound them. And nonprofits are notoriously understaffed and underbudgeted, so they always would welcome help. It shouldn't be too difficult at all. I will tell you this, that you and your colleagues, to be very patient, because it sounds really good to do this great nonprofit work. It's like really hard because it's not like a job. It's not like I don't know what it is, but it's so unlike business or a for-profit.
It's like a lot of sporadic hours.
Yeah. And if you've ever worked for a for-profit organization and you go to a nonprofit, you might think, oh my God, these people are. So you have to be patient with kind of the culture and develop kind of a cultural competency around nonprofit culture. Is completely different. So don't be turned off from it immediately.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, and good luck. Ma'am.
Thank you so much for your talk. I teach American Ethnic Studies here at Kansas State University. And one of the things that I do in my classroom as a predominantly white institution, I'm talking about sensitive subjects with a lot of people, generally from the Midwest, who, as a Southerner, I'm like, these are some of the nicest people I've ever met.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about topics that you don't always talk about in mixed company.
Yeah.
And part of what I tell people is anti-racist work is hard. It requires, if we're going to address these systematic issues, that some people who are used to being comfortable have to be uncomfortable and sit in that, and other people who are used to being quiet have to speak up. I would like you to speak to how we can encourage students and faculty and administrators and citizens to embrace that and understand that that's part of civility, that's part of the civil public discourse that is foundational in who and what we are as Americans.
Thank you. And thank you for what you do. And I'm so happy to hear that you're allowed to still teach ethnic studies, because, you know, they're gutting it everywhere. So kudos to K-State. I would say that it's in your best interest to do so. Do you remember the graphs about the demographic shifts? It's going to happen. So maybe hard, but you need to have those conversations right now. You need to have had them 20 years ago, but you absolutely need to have them right now. As students, and students, the younger students, you probably already know this. You've seen it, even though the Midwest may not look like, you know, California or whatever. You have some sense that white people are becoming a minority. You have a sense of it, even if it's not reflected in your own little circle. You know it's happening. So lean in and have those conversations now, because it's going to be to your benefit. If you don't do that and you remain in your comfort zone, you're going to be living in isolated communities that look just like they do now. And not that they're bad, but do you want that? Do you want that? Do you want that to be your life? And then do you want that to be your children's life? Do you want to be able to prepare your children for the multicultural society that is coming? Do you want that? Because, one, you have to want it, right? And then make yourself a part of it. It's all new, but it's, especially for students, it's good for you because it's new and you can kind of help create this together. It's harder for the older ones, right? It's harder in terms of your peer group or your social group. Your social group is pretty set. Oh, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe. Okay. Okay, she was forewarned 41 years ago. Where are you now? You said, where are you now, honey? Where are you? Here. You live here in Manhattan? What are the demographics of that? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Is that what your world looks like right now? Your circle? Your friend circle?
I mean, I live in St. Mary's. It's
Okay.
pretty white. But I'm from Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay.
And
You
then
don't live
I came
in...
here
Okay.
to get educated and got
Okay.
stuck
Okay.
in the country.
I would say that you live here for a reason, but that's just me. Back to the students, because it's you that can make the shifts. You adults can make the shifts too, but it's more in your best interest to do so. And those of you that are thinking of having a family or you have small children, you've got to do something too. Or even adults who have, like, we were talking at the teacher group earlier about the importance of talking to your white kids about what it means to be white. That's something that you didn't have to do before, and that you need to start having those conversations, right? People think, or the mistaken impression, that it's easier for people of color to have those conversations. It's not. We just had to. It was born out of necessity. And the necessity is now present for you too. Because as I warned them, if you don't have the conversations, your young people are going to be on this hate map. They're going to gravitate towards people and groups that recognize them and will talk to them about what it means to be white. And you don't want them telling your kids what it means to be white. You want to be able to figure that out together and put a positive spin on it, right? It's positive. It doesn't have to be rooted in white supremacy, but that's what happens to young people who are left with no one to talk about. Remember, it was introduced, I worked with juvenile hate crime offenders, and that's it. Their parents, their families, nobody wanted to talk to them about it, and they were the minority on their high school campus. They start acting out, and they started gravitating towards the white supremacists. just as any marginalized kid who was filling out might gravitate towards a gang. White supremacy is the white kid's gang. I don't think you understand that. So you need to start having the conversations. And it's okay. Everybody has a positive racial identity. We just have to frame it. We have to pull it out. That's all. Reject that whole notion of, white bad, people of color good. Everybody is good. And there have always been anti-racist white people forever. You can be one of those too. Right? I hope that helps. Mm-hmm. Oh.
And it used to be Fox News every time it wasn't The Price is Right. It is now MSNBC.
Oh my God.
I'm having talking about the students like they're the only activists around.
Okay. Thank you. And I didn't mean to say that at all.
No, I know you did.
Okay.
I couldn't resist. I was on a roll.
You were great. I'm glad you got MSNBC. I hate to go into places that have Fox News. Go ahead.
Hi. My question actually rolls off really well from what we were previously talking about. I'm a senior in elementary education, also a nonprofit leadership minor. And my question is more about how am I going to deal with those young students, kindergarten, first grades. I work at Boys and Girls Club, and I've had to deal with kids talking about Donald Trump and all those things already, and I did not know what to do. And I picked up this magazine. I'm looking forward to diving into that later, but I just wanted to hear your teacher perspective. How do you really engage? How do you teach your young kids, like kindergarteners, to talk about this?
Put downs are not okay. And you can talk, that's developmentally appropriate for, little kids. No put downs. We just establish that as a ground rule. And if it comes, with the Donald Trump stamp of approval, it's still a put down. I'm sorry, we don't speak that way in our community or in our classroom. We don't. And you could tell them why it's wrong. We respect everyone here, whatever it is that they say. You can just call it a put down and not get into it with the Trump thing. Address the comment and disregard kind of who it's attached to. Don't get into a political discussion about it.
Thank you.
Especially with little kids, because that's all you can say. No, that's not really right. We don't put people down that way, honey. Then go talk to their parents. No. Yes, sir.
Symbolism is so powerful and so influential in the society that we live in. And I think in the last year or so, we've seen some things that I didn't anticipate seeing in my lifetime, like the Confederate flag being taken down in South Carolina. But what happened as a result was kind of an emboldening of the spirit in bringing that flag forward again, and the claim that it wasn't about this or it wasn't about that. It wasn't about slavery, it was about Southern culture. But what I have seen happen as a result is it seems to be more of a symbol of divisiveness, a symbol of hatred. And I appreciate your comments on that.
That's exactly right. And people have always said it's about heritage, not hate. Well, the heritage is born of hate. That was a wonderful thing that happened when the flag went down in South Carolina. What we tracked, and we did a report on all of the Confederate symbols that are all across the country, ones that are on public space, schools named after Confederate heroes, post office, federal space, public space, where it's not supposed to be. And we saw a huge pushback. You're exactly right. That happened there, and people reacted to it because that's a shift, that's a change. You're taking away my symbol. You're taking away a part of who I am. There were, I think over 300 rallies in support of the Confederate flag just because of what began to happen across the country. And quite a number of flags did come down, and some places were renamed, but they don't outnumber the people that came out of the woodwork to defend the Confederate flag.
And I'll never understand seeing somebody fly an American flag and a Confederate flag on the same porch.
Well, you know, when I first moved to Alabama, I didn't understand it either. The flag, the symbolism, the bumper stickers. I was like, what? What are you trying to tell me? I was like, I was just really, and I was baffled. And I was scared, especially if I was in a rural area. I was like, what is going on, really? And then it was explained to me, I came to better understand and empathize with the fact that they're very connected to it because they lost a disproportionate number of people in the Civil War that fought on the Confederate side. And they were, and as happens in a lot of wars, they were poor people. And that is what they have, right? That is what they have been taught for generations was good and right about who they were and who their families are, right? So I try to allow the heritage part and try to educate on the other part. And sometimes, not often, sometimes it is simply that. And they have no real connection to the hate ideology. It's more of an ignorance of what it stands for and how it was, you know, kind of bastardized by white supremacist groups in the same way that the symbol, the swastika, was taken. And so that said, we can have this educational, kind of intellectual conversation about it, but once you understand, then I don't want to see it, right? And so then it's a battle around, well, I got to keep it because it's more important to me. No, because you also need to understand what it represents in terms of all the people that were killed. Sorry.
No worries.
Get me all excited.
Hi. My name is Shakira Everett. I'm a senior in agricultural communications. Doesn't have much to do with civil rights,
great.
but I'm still working for it. I'm also the multicultural student affairs director with the student governing, and so that's like a liaison between the students and the administration. I just want to say thank you for coming here today and speaking on hate, because I've been wanting to have a forum or, you know, a discussion of some sort to talk about hate that's in people's hearts and stuff. And I was a little nervous at first. I'm like, how are people really going to take in the fact that I'm saying it's not all just your skin or all the layers, it's about what's in your heart for real. So I want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
For coming here today, because
You're welcome.
I got a chance
Thank
to
you. Thank you
continue
for
to move
coming.
forward.
I appreciate you taking time out to come. All of you, I really appreciate it. I want to get a plug in for your next speaker, Tim Wise, before Linda cuts me off. Make sure you come get that. And faculty member, that's the one that you're going to have to work with your other faculty people on. And just let me tell you, he's not as nice as I am. So be forewarned. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.